My girlfriend said she didn't want me at her graduation. Then I found out her ex was there instead. When Chloe and I first met, we were both sitting on the floor of the library, surrounded by empty coffee cups and open textbooks, completely exhausted during finals week. She was stressing over a research paper, and I offered her one of my highlighters. That was all it took. One smile, one shared sigh, and we fell into each other's orbit. For 2.5 years, she was my person, my best friend, my partner in everything. We studied together, celebrated wins together, and picked each other up during every loss. She was younger by a year, still working through her undergrad when I had already graduated and started working. I never once held that against her. In fact, I kind of loved being the one she leaned on. I'd drive over after long shifts just to help her study. I'd surprise her with her favorite pastries during all-nighters, leave little sticky notes around her apartment with inside jokes or words of encouragement. We had plans, real ones. She'd finish school, we'd travel for a while, maybe move to a bigger city, get a dog, build a life together. So when she started acting strange in the weeks leading up to her graduation, I chalked it up to stress. She was overwhelmed between exams, her thesis, family expectations, and the ceremony itself. I gave her space. I didn't want to add pressure, but then she started pulling away in ways that didn't feel like stress. She wouldn't answer my texts for hours, sometimes even full days. She stopped inviting me to late-night study sessions. She'd get weirdly defensive if I asked what she was working on. I started feeling like a guest in my own relationship. And then, 1 week before her graduation, we were sitting in her kitchen, eating takeout. I remember it vividly. She was picking at her food, barely making eye contact, and I asked, "So, what's the plan for graduation? Want me to bring flowers?" I was thinking I could take some photos after the ceremony. She froze, put down her fork. Then she said something I never expected. "I don't think I want you there." I blinked. "What?" She sighed, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. "It's just, my parents are flying in. My extended family too. It's going to be a lot. Stressful. I kind of want to keep it low-key. Just them and a few close friends. Chloe, I've been there for you through everything. You said yourself this day mattered to us both. Why wouldn't I be there?" "It's not personal," she said quickly. "It's just a lot of people. I want the day to be about me. And if I'm worrying about how you're doing or trying to include you with my family, I won't be able to focus." I didn't know what to say. It was like she had been writing this speech in her head for days. I could see how rehearsed it was. And yet, I agreed. I didn't want to guilt her into anything. I didn't want to be that boyfriend who insisted on making her day about himself. So I nodded, told her I understood, that I'd celebrate with her after. She promised we'd go to dinner the next day, just the two of us, that I was still her favorite person, that this was just a moment, not a message. I smiled. Lead. Said I was okay with it. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The night before graduation, I sent her a text saying how proud I was. She didn't respond. I figured she was busy with her family. I went to bed early, planning to stay off social media so I wouldn't torture myself. But of course, the next morning, I opened Instagram. I wish I hadn't. The first post I saw was from one of her friends. Bright sunshine, caps flying in the air, everyone smiling. There she was in the center, radiant, holding her diploma. And there, off to the side, was a guy. He looked familiar. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped. It was Mason, her ex. The one she told me was a thing of the past, a toxic chapter she was grateful to have closed. I kept scrolling. Another post, a group shot, her arm around Mason's shoulder, his hand low on her waist, laughing, smiling, too comfortable. I felt cold. This wasn't a family-only event. This wasn't low-key. She had invited friends, old and new, including him, including the one person she swore meant nothing to her. I didn't know what to do. Should I call her? Text? Show up? I just sat there on the edge of my bed, holding my phone like it was some cursed object. And then another story popped up. A boomerang. Her clinking glasses with Mason, both of them with champagne. The caption said, "We made it," not "I made it." We. I couldn't breathe. I must have sat there staring at that 1-second loop of her clinking glasses with Mason for 15 straight minutes. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, and my chest felt like it was being crushed under something heavy. I didn't cry. Not at first. It wasn't sadness. It was something darker, something hotter. Rage and humiliation, twisted into one nauseating knot. We made it. That's what she wrote. As if he had been the one helping her through sleepless nights and panic attacks. As if I hadn't been the one proofreading her thesis at 3 a.m. or cooking for her when she forgot to eat. as if Mason had been anything but a bitter memory she claimed to regret. I got out of bed and paced my apartment, my mind spiraling. I didn't want to believe what I saw. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he just showed up. Maybe he was invited by one of her friends. Maybe she didn't know he'd be there. But then, why would she be clinking glasses with him? Why would he have his hand on her waist? Why was she smiling like that? Like she used to smile with me. And most of all, why didn't she want me there? I opened her contact and stared at the screen. I couldn't bring myself to type anything. Anything I wrote felt weak or pathetic. So I just called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. 10 minutes later, I called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Can we talk?" No response. I waited an hour. Nothing. I texted again. I saw Mason was there. I need to understand what's going on. Still nothing. I sat on my couch in silence for the rest of the day. Barely moving, just replaying everything over and over. The photos, her words, my own stupidity for not pushing harder when she said she didn't want me there. Late that night, after midnight, I got a reply. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. Like this was just bad timing. Like I wasn't supposed to know." I typed furiously, "Why was he there, Chloe? Why did you lie to me?" She replied a few minutes later, "I didn't lie. I just didn't want to complicate the day. You would have been upset if you saw him there. You told me you only wanted your family there. I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't want drama. So instead you excluded me? Your boyfriend? So he could be there and I couldn't?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then nothing. After 10 minutes, I sent one more. "How long have you been talking to him again?" No reply. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called her again, and again she didn't pick up. I sent one final message. "If I don't get the truth, we're done." 5 hours passed. Nothing. Then finally, she texted, "We started talking a few weeks ago, just as friends. I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan. I didn't mean for this to get messy." That was all she gave me. No apology. No explanation I hadn't already guessed. Just cowardice. And that's when it hit me. She didn't want me there because she knew what it would look like. She knew I'd see right through it. She didn't want the confrontation. She didn't want to see the look on my face while she played pretend with her ex in the same space I had always imagined standing proudly by her side. I left the messages on read and turned off my phone. For the next couple days, I went completely offline. No social media, no texts. My friends noticed I was quiet, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. Not yet. It felt too raw, too humiliating. When I finally logged back in, I saw what I had feared. A new post on Chloe's feed. Mason and her, side by side on the university lawn, arms around each other. She captioned, "Full circle, no tags, no mention of me." It was like I had never existed. That was the first time I cried. Not because she left me, because I realized she had been leaving me for weeks, and I was the only one who hadn't noticed. The silence between us stretched into a week. No calls, no texts, no half-hearted attempts at an apology. Just complete, echoing emptiness. I started playing back every moment over the past few months, trying to find the cracks. And the worst part? They were there. I just didn't want to see them. The late replies. The sudden defensiveness. The weird excuses not to meet up. She once told me her professor scheduled a meeting last minute and bailed on dinner. We were supposed to celebrate her finishing her thesis. I remember I just said, "It's okay, we'll reschedule," and offered to bring her takeout anyway. Now I couldn't help but wonder, was she even with her professor that night? I didn't recognize the person I had been with not because she'd changed overnight, but because she'd been changing gradually, and I'd convinced myself that loving her meant trusting her blindly. A few days later, she messaged me again. Not to apologize. Not to fix things. Just, "I think we should talk when you're ready." No urgency. No regret. Just like she was doing me a favor. I responded, "Talk about what?" "You made your decision," she replied. "It's not that simple. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it was that simple." She chose to reconnect with someone who hurt her, kept it secret, and pushed me away to make space for him. Still, I agreed to meet. Not because I thought we could fix anything, but because I needed to see if she'd look me in the eye and admit what she did. We met at a quiet coffee shop off campus. I showed up early. She arrived late. When she walked in, I stood up instinctively. And for a second, the muscle memory kicked in. I almost kissed her cheek. But she looked different now. Same face, different weight behind the eyes. The person in front of me wasn't the same Chloe I stayed up late comforting during her anxiety spirals. This Chloe looked like someone who had already rewritten the story to make herself the victim. We sat. She started with, "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond. She folded her hands, took a breath like she was about to deliver a speech. I know I should have told you about Mason sooner, but I didn't know where it was going. And I didn't want to ruin what we had. I raised an eyebrow. So you decided to keep me in the dark and just see if he replaced me? She flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. You lied. You told me not to come to your graduation. Not because of stress or family or whatever excuse you gave me, but because he was going to be there. I didn't lie. I didn't tell you everything. That's called lying, Chloe. She looked down, like that somehow made her noble. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. Repeatedly. And you made sure I wasn't there so you wouldn't have to feel guilty about it. So you wouldn't have to look me in the eye while holding his hand. Her voice was small. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. She paused too long. That's when I knew. It started with just talking, she said eventually. He reached out after a class. We bumped into each other. He apologized for how things ended back then. He seemed different. Kinder. He said he regretted everything, and I don't know, Ethan. It stirred something in me. I got confused, and instead of telling me, I said, you just quietly pushed me out. I didn't want to hurt you. Stop saying that, I snapped. You didn't want to be the bad guy. That's not the same thing. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't argue. Because she knew I was right. For a second, we both just sat there. No words. Just that unbearable weight of finality hanging between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't think you'd let me go if I told you the truth. And that hurt more than anything else. Because it meant she knew she was already halfway gone. And instead of being honest, she kept me around like a safety net. A backup. You're right, I said coldly. I wouldn't have let you go. I would have fought for you. And you knew that. But instead, you let me waste my love on a version of you that wasn't real, and tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't feel moved. I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't offer comfort. Because I had nothing left to give. I think we're done here, I said quietly, standing up. She nodded without protest. I left the coffee shop and didn't look back. That night, I unfollowed her on every platform, deleted the photos, archived the texts, removed every trace of our future that would never happen. It didn't make me feel better, but it made the silence hurt less. The next few weeks were a blur of numb routine. Wake up, go to work, pretend everything was fine, smile when people asked how I was doing, lie through my teeth, go home, sit in silence, stare at the ceiling, repeat. My apartment still had pieces of her everywhere. Her shampoo in the shower, her hoodie on the back of my chair, the mug she always used, still sitting in the sink because I couldn't bring myself to wash it. Everything felt like a memory I didn't ask to keep. I told myself I should just throw it all out, rip the Band-Aid off. But every time I tried, I ended up just sitting on the floor, holding her things, wondering how love could disappear so quietly. Some nights I'd find myself scrolling through old photos. Us at the beach, her wrapped in a blanket on my couch, her laughing at something I said, eyes closed, mouth wide, like the world didn't matter as long as we had each other. How do you stop loving someone who used to feel like home? I avoided social media as best I could, but the algorithm is cruel. Every now and then I'd see her name pop up, a tag in someone else's post, a blurry background where I could just make out her silhouette. Or worse, his. The day I finally blocked her account, I sat with my phone in my hand for almost an hour. I didn't want to do it out of spite. I wanted to do it to protect myself. Because no matter how much it hurt, a part of me still wanted her to come back. Still hoped this was some awful dream she'd wake up from and realize she'd made a mistake. But she didn't. She posted a new profile photo a few days later. Her and Mason standing under some string lights at what looked like a backyard party. She was leaning into him. His hand was on the small of her back. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not because I missed her, but because I finally understood. She hadn't chosen him over me. She had stopped choosing me long before she ever invited him back into her life. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just hollow. I started trying to rebuild pieces of myself. I reached out to old friends I'd drifted from while I'd been consumed by the relationship. I joined a climbing gym near my place, something I'd always wanted to try but never did because weekends were always our time. I took myself out to dinner, bought books I'd always meant to read, started cooking again instead of just surviving on takeout and guilt. Some days were good, some days weren't. Healing isn't linear, no matter how many motivational posts say otherwise. I still had dreams about her sometimes, not the good kind. The kind where she'd show up at my door, crying, saying she was sorry. The kind where I forgave her in the dream, only to wake up furious at myself for even considering it. But eventually, I stopped checking her page. Eventually, I could hear her name without flinching. And one day, something small happened. Something stupid, really. I was standing in line at the grocery store, and this little girl in front of me dropped her juice box. I picked it up and handed it to her, and she gave me this big gap-toothed smile and said, "Thank you, mister." I smiled back. Not because of the moment itself, but because I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about Chloe. It hit me then. I was moving on. Slowly, painfully, but surely. A month or so later, I ran into one of her friends at a bookstore. We made small talk, awkward and brief. And then, without prompting, she said, "I'm really sorry about everything. You didn't deserve that." I just nodded. I didn't need to ask what she meant. Everyone around us had seen the way Chloe handled it. I think, in some twisted way, she thought she was sparing me. But hiding someone from their own heartbreak doesn't protect them. It just drags it out longer. Before we parted ways, her friend said, "For what it's worth, she talks about you a lot. Says she regrets how she handled it." That should have made me feel something. But it didn't. Regret isn't the same as love. And some bridges once burned shouldn't be rebuilt. By the time the seasons changed, I was back to breathing normally. I could walk past places we used to go without that tightness in my chest. I started dating again. Not seriously, not yet. But enough to remind myself that connection still existed beyond what she left behind. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her to come back. It had been almost 5 months since Chloe's graduation. 5 months since the texts stopped, the messages went unanswered, and I deleted every photo of us from my phone. Life had slowly rearranged itself. Not quite the same shape, not the same pace, but familiar enough that I could breathe again. The pain was still there, in echoes, but it no longer sat in my chest like a weight. More like a shadow, always behind me, but never blocking the sun entirely. Then, one Sunday afternoon, she emailed me. Not texted, not called. An actual email. The subject line read, "I know you don't want to hear from me, but please read." I stared at it for a long time. Half of me wanted to delete it on sight. The other half was curious. Not because I wanted her back. That door was shut, sealed, locked with a dozen deadbolts. But some part of me needed closure. Real closure. Not the half excuses she gave me at that coffee shop. So I clicked. It wasn't long. A few paragraphs. But every word felt like it had been agonized over. She wrote that things with Mason didn't turn out the way she thought. That reconnecting with him gave her a sense of comfort, like rewinding her life to a simpler time. She admitted it was selfish. She said she thought she was chasing clarity, but really she was running from responsibility. She never said she cheated. But the way she wrote it, the way she avoided the word, it almost hurt more. She ended the email by saying she didn't expect forgiveness, that she just wanted me to know I didn't do anything wrong, that I had loved her in all the right ways, and she'd thrown it away out of fear and confusion. And then, the last, "If I could go back to that day, I'd ask you to sit in the front row." I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time. I didn't reply. Because she was right. I didn't want to hear from her. Not anymore. It's strange how the things you once begged for eventually lose all meaning. She wanted to be the hero of her own story again. She wanted to believe that by admitting guilt, she could still be someone worth missing. But I had already made peace with the fact that not every ending needs a sequel. Some chapters end, not with a cliffhanger or a sudden twist, but with quiet understanding. We outgrow people who refuse to grow with us. I didn't hate her. I just no longer needed her to explain anything. A few weeks later, I saw Mason's profile pop up through mutual friends. Not intentionally, just one of those unavoidable algorithm coincidences. He had posted a long caption about new beginnings and lessons learned the hard way, a cryptic message that hinted at heartbreak and guilt, paired with a picture of him alone on a hiking trail. Chloe wasn't in any of his recent posts. I didn't feel vindicated. There was no satisfaction in it. Just a soft confirmation that the life I thought I was missing out on wasn't worth mourning after all. And slowly, I began to stop thinking of her entirely. One morning, I was at the same library where we first met, waiting for a friend. A girl sat next to me, sighing loudly, her notes spread out in disarray. Her highlighter had run dry. I smiled, reached into my bag and handed her one from mine. She looked up and smiled back. "Thanks, I'm losing my mind over this project." And in that small, quiet moment, something clicked. Life was beginning again. Not a repeat. Not a replacement. Something new. Something clean. That encounter at the library didn't turn into a love story. Not right away. But it reminded me that I still had something to offer. That even after everything Chloe broke in me, there were still parts she hadn't touched. Parts that belonged only to me. I started noticing the world again. Noticing it without her shadow in the frame. Sunlight on brick walls. Strangers laughing into their phones. The sound of traffic while walking home from work. It wasn't about moving on to someone else. It was about moving on to myself. And yeah, I still had moments where the past reached out like a ghost. A familiar song would come on and I'd flinch. I'd catch the scent of her perfume on someone in a crowd, and my stomach would twist before my mind caught up. But those moments didn't crush me any. They reminded me I had survived something I once thought I wouldn't. A few months later, a friend invited me to a small get-together. Nothing major, just drinks, music, a few mutuals. I didn't plan on staying long, but I went, if only to prove to myself that I could. And that's where I met Julia. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't trying too hard. She wasn't loud or overly charming. She was grounded, thoughtful, warm in a way that didn't ask for anything in return. We talked for hours about books, weird family traditions, awkward school memories, and somehow ended up sharing a pizza in the kitchen while the rest of the party melted around us. She didn't remind me of Chloe, and that's why I liked her. Julia didn't ask for the broken parts of me. She just met me where I was. No pressure, no assumptions. After a few dates, I told her the truth. The whole story. Maybe not every tiny detail, but the arc of it. The love, the betrayal, the slow unraveling. She listened without interruption. And when I finished, she didn't offer pity or false comfort. She just said, "I'm glad you walked away." That was it. And for the first time, I believed it. Because for a while, I had been carrying this warped idea that I had lost something irreplaceable. That Chloe was the great love I somehow fumbled. But love that asks you to sit out of your partner's milestones, that isn't love. Love doesn't hide. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't make you feel like an accessory to someone else's spotlight. If anything, I had gained something. Clarity, strength, a sense of self I hadn't even realized I was missing. Now, over a year later, I look back on everything not with resentment, but with acceptance. I no longer wonder what would have happened if I had just insisted on going to that graduation. Because I know the truth now. If someone truly wants you beside them in the big moments, they don't ask you to stay away. They reach for your hand and say, "Let's do this together." Chloe didn't do that. Instead, she reached for the past and left me behind in the present. But I'm not bitter. She taught me what I'll never accept again. And someday, when I'm standing in someone's front row, smiling, cheering, proud, I'll know I'm there because they chose me without hesitation. Not as a backup, not as a comfort, but because they see me as part of their future. Chloe's graduation was supposed to be the day we celebrated what we'd built together. Instead, it became the day I saw what I needed to tear down. I loved her. I really did. But love isn't just about being there for someone. It's about them wanting you there too. And if she didn't want me at her graduation, maybe it's because she already knew I wouldn't be at her future either.